Good evening. I want to welcome you to our service of worship on this Good Friday. We're taking two services and kind of putting them together here. So, a tenebrae service is an ancient service in which the lights go down, and which candles or some other form of light representing the disciples are extinguished throughout the service. We're doing that, but we're adding to it Stations of the Cross, where we look at the events of the last couple of days of Jesus' life. And we go through each event, and the information about them is on the back of your little handout. It tells you what the stations are and gives you the biblical reference to it. So I hope you enjoy this service. I do want to say we'll be using some banners tonight that were made by a dear friend of mine. And she is just thrilled to death that somebody's using them more than once, because there was a lot of work that went into them. So I hope you feel blessed by them. And I want to invite you to join with me in the responsive reading on the front side of your handout. Who has believed our report? To whom is the arm of the Lord revealed? He shall grow up before him as a tender plant, and as a root out of a dry ground. Nothing about his appearance is attractive. When we shall see him, there's nothing beautiful about him that we should desire him. He is despised and rejected, a man of sorrows and acquainted with grief. He was despised. Surely he has borne our griefs and carried our sorrows. He was wounded for our transgressions. The chastisement of our peace was upon him. All we, like sheep, have gone astray. We have turned every one to his own way. And now, let us begin our journey to the cross.
As was his custom, to the Mount of Olives, and the disciples followed him. When he reached the place, he said to them, "Pray that you may not come into the time of trial." Then he withdrew from them about a stone's throw, knelt down, and prayed, "Father, if you are willing, remove this cup from me. Yet not my will, but yours be done." Then an angel from heaven appeared to him and gave him strength. In his anguish, he prayed more earnestly, and his sweat became like great drops of blood falling down on the ground.
Jesus, you have brought us out of the garden so late in the evening. I know you have a reason, but it seems to me so strange. Why are you not sleeping and getting the rest you need? I don't understand what you meant by your soul being crushed with grief. Is one of us about to die? Is something going to happen that causes you such pain? I don't understand how you expect me to know what to pray. You said pray that I won't be overcome by temptation, but we are in the garden in the middle of the night. What temptation is there here? My eyes are heavy, and I am tired from the walk to Jerusalem over the last few days. I am trying best I can to pray, but my eyes become ever heavier, and I find myself nodding off to sleep. You return to find us sleeping and to wake us. I am ashamed that I could not follow your direction. There is something different about you. Your face has what appears to be bloodstains on it, as though you have been sweating blood itself. But you seem so very calm and at peace, even though once again you tell me to pray, so I will not be overcome by temptation. I wish I could understand. As we stand here, I hear the sounds of footsteps in the distance. Who could be coming to the garden this late?
While he was still speaking, Judas, one of the 12, arrived. With him was a large crowd with swords and clubs from the chief priests and the elders of the people. Now the betrayer had given them a sign, saying, "The one I will kiss is the man. Arrest him." And once he came up to Jesus and said, "Greetings, Rabbi," and kissed him. Jesus said to him, "Friend, do what you are here to do." Then they came and laid hands on Jesus and arrested him. Suddenly, one of those who was with Jesus put his hand on his sword, drew it, and struck the slave of the high priest, cutting off his ear. Then Jesus said to him, "Put your sword back into its place, for all who take the sword will perish by the sword. Do you think that I cannot appeal to my Father, and he will at once send me more than 12 legions of angels? But how then would the scriptures be fulfilled, which say it must happen in this way?" At that hour, Jesus said to the crowds, "Have you come out with swords and clubs to arrest me, as though I were a bandit? Day after day I sat in the temple teaching, and you did not arrest me. But all this has taken place, so that the scriptures of the prophets may be fulfilled." Then all the disciples deserted him and fled.
With a kiss betrayed is the Son of Man, and the cup of death given to his hand. A flicker of light in the distance, a murmur of angry men. Who enters the garden of olives wearing the guise of friend? It is better Judas Iscariot, had you not seen the light of day, than for 30 pieces of silver you, the master here betray. He is brought like a lamb to slaughter. He is numbered with the dead. All those who have loved and followed him have forsaken him and fled. With a kiss betrayed is the Son of Man, and the cup of death given to his hand.
Peter was following at a distance. When they had kindled a fire in the middle of the courtyard and sat down together, Peter sat among them. Then a servant girl, seeing him in the firelight, stared at him and said, "This man also was with him." But he denied it, saying, "Woman, I do not know him." A little later, someone else, on seeing him, said, "You are also one of them." But Peter said, "Man, I am not." Then about an hour later, still another kept insisting, "Surely this man also was with them, for he is a Galilean." But Peter said, "Man, I do not know what you are talking about." At that moment, while he was still speaking, the cock crowed. The Lord turned and looked at Peter. Then Peter remembered the word of the Lord, how he had said to him, "Before the cock crows today, you will deny me 3 times." And he went out and wept bitterly. I tried to remain unnoticed to blend in with the crowd. I wanted to be close to Jesus, but I was afraid of what they would do to me if they knew I was one of his followers. I knelt by the fire, looking into the flames, wondering if all I had seen and experienced had now come to nothing. Is this the end? I am lost in my thoughts. I am hurting for my friend who loved me even when my temper got the best of me, who performed miracles. This man I cannot fully understand. One of the slave girls of the high priest recognizes me and points me out as one of his followers. In fear, I deny knowing him. Who could blame me? Yet I felt horrible regret. 2 more of those present recognize me and point me out. I curse and declare I am not one of them and don't know him. I hear the cock crowing and the words he spoke ring in my ears. I have denied him 3 times. How could he have known? My heart is broken. I leave that place quickly and I burst into tears. I have denied the one I have loved and followed. What am I to do now?
And Peter wept, as though his heart would break, to think that
They took Jesus to the high priest, and all the chief priests, the elders, and the scribes were assembled. Peter had followed him at a distance, right into the courtyard of the high priest, and he was sitting with the guards, warming himself at the fire. Now the chief priest and the whole council were looking for testimony against Jesus to put him to death, but they found none. For many gave false testimony against him, and their testimony did not agree. Some stood up and gave false testimony against him, saying, "We heard him saying, 'I will destroy this temple that is made with hands, and in 3 days I will build another, not made with hands.' But even on this point their testimony did not agree. Then the high priest stood up before them and asked Jesus, 'Have ye no answer? What is it that they testify against you?' But he was silent and did not answer. Again, the high priest asked him, 'Are you the Messiah, the Son of the Blessed One?' Jesus said, 'I am. And you will see the Son of Man seated at the right hand of the power and coming with the clouds of heaven.' Then the high priest tore his clothes and said, 'Why do we still need witnesses? You have heard his blasphemy. What is your decision?' All of them condemned him as deserving death.
I sat quietly in my place as they dragged Jesus into the room. I am afraid of what is about to happen. I know our chief priest cannot put him to death or mete out any real punishment, but I also know that Pilate listens to him. There has been growing fear of Jesus among the Sanhedrin. Many are afraid he will cause the Romans to destroy us, or he will lead the people away and they will follow him instead of the law of Moses. He has been called a subversive for talking of destroying the temple and raising it again in 3 days. He has healed the sick and blind. He appears to be a kind and gentle man, unlike any other, yet he claims to be the Son of God. The witnesses who testify are all telling stories that do not agree, but I fear that will not matter. The time will come and we will be called on to make a decision. The high priest is now questioning him. I pray that he answers to the high priest's satisfaction, and this can all be dismissed and done. What did he say? The high priest asked if he is the Son of God, the Messiah, and he answered that he is. That cannot be. Surely the Messiah would have set us free by now if he were with us. The high priest has made the decision for us. He has rent his garment and said he deserves death. I still am unsure of what has just happened. I ask God for wisdom, but I remain silent. This man will be sent to Pilate, for only the Romans can put a man to death. Jesus has been turned over to Pilate. Surely he will be careful of what he says. Pilate will not want to be involved with this mess. Pilate is only interested in looking good before the crowd. He is such a puppet of the Romans, and he is still so afraid of the Sanhedrin and their power. Maybe Pilate won't even ask any questions. Just punish him and let him go. Pilate is asking him if he is a king, as the high priest has charged. Jesus doesn't even answer him with a straight answer. Pilate is trying his best to send him back to his Jewish accusers and have them deal with him. But that old fox knows that there will not be a good outcome to this. Jesus remains silent. Wait. Pilate is offering to release Jesus, as is the custom. Who is that he is offering alongside Jesus? It's Barabbas, that murderer. Well, surely the people will want Jesus released. He has been so kind to the poor and healed the sick. They won't want Barabbas on the streets again. What a strange situation. Jesus, who is called the Son of God and has healed, and the murderer Barabbas, whose name means the Son of God. Who will be released? Who will the crowd request?
Now at the festival, he used to release a prisoner for them, anyone for whom they asked. Now a man called Barabbas was in prison with the rebels who had committed murder during the insurrection. So the crowd came and began to ask Pilate to do for them according to this custom. Then he answered them, "Do you want me to release for you the king of the Jews?" For he realized that it was out of jealousy that the chief priests had handed him over. But the chief priests stirred up the crowd to have him release Barabbas for them instead. Pilate spoke to them again. "Then what do you wish me to do with the man you called the king of the Jews?" They shouted back, "Crucify him." Pilate asked them, "Why? What evil has he done?" But they shouted all the more, "Crucify him." So Pilate, wishing to satisfy the crowd, released Barabbas for them, and after flogging Jesus, he handed him over to be crucified.
What evil has he done, this man of Galilee? He made the deaf to hear, the blind he made to see. The seed which he has sown has been trodden under and withered on the stalk for the thorns to plunder, for the thorns to plunder. From the beloved 12, the seed shall spring and grow, for in their noble hearts the seed is theirs to sow. Help he leaves the helpless, new hope where there was none, and hanging from a cross, his kingdom shall be won.
Jesus, I wish you would proclaim who you are. I wish you would confront the disbelief of the people. Surely someone will speak for you. Where are those you healed? Where are the blind who now see? Where are all those who experienced your many miracles? No one speaks. No voice comes in your defense. You are alone. You stand before Pilate, the enforcer for Rome, the cruel empire, but he is not in control here. He cannot make you confess to a false crime, nor can he quiet the crowd. All his power amounts to nothing. I know the feeling of standing in the presence of worldly power and of being judged even when I have done nothing wrong. The feeling of helplessness in the face of others. Have I also treated others in that way? Have I judged without evidence or listened to lies over truth? Have I failed to speak for others who are condemned when they are innocent? Do I have the courage to speak? Am I willing to stand for the weak and the oppressed? Am I too afraid of the power and hate of this world to stand up and speak? Do I choose the easy path of silence over the path of righteousness? Sadly, the answer is yes.
Then the soldiers of the governor took Jesus into the governor's headquarters, and they gathered the whole cohort around him. They stripped him and put a scarlet robe on him, and after twisting some thorns into a crown, they put it on his head. They put a reed in his right hand and knelt before him and mocked him, saying, "Hail, King of the Jews!"
Wash now your hands of it. Jesus must die. His blood be on our heads, our children and our heirs. Take up the cry, crucify, crucify. Weep, O Jerusalem, weep with dismay. Your daughters weep, weep and wail. The priceless gift of blood He gives today. You can never repay, can never repay.
The soldiers take Jesus and scourge him. They mock him, dressing him in mock robe to shame him for his claims. One said, "How can he be a king without a crown?" Another of the guard makes a crown out of a thorn bush and presses it onto his head. They pushed it down, and the thorns pierce his skin, and he begins to bleed. I watch as the blood runs down the face of the one I know as Messiah. They mock him more by dancing and bowing around him, unaware of who he really is. The blood continues to flow, and they laugh even more. I remember some of the things he said about the future and what would happen to him. Could this be what he was talking about? Could this be what he meant about the cup he must drink? He remains silent, and they tire of the torment, remove the robe, drag him to his feet, and tell him he must bear his own cross. The only thing that remains is that horrible crown. I know his pain is excruciating. God, please stop this act of disgrace. For this reason, the Father loves me because I lay down my life in order to take it up again. No one takes it from me, but I lay it down of my own accord. I have power to lay it down, and I have power to take it up again. I have received this command from my Father.
Jesus, I cringe at the pain of the thorns, but I am wounded far more deeply at the humiliation and degradation you suffer, that the very thing you came to offer us as a gift becomes a source of ridicule. The crowds thought of a king in terms of power, but you came to be the King of Kings, who shepherds his people, who takes responsibility for their well-being, whose principles are faithfulness, justice, and righteousness. And yet, the people are not ready for that kind of king. I would like to think that I am ready to follow you, who offer a kingdom of peace and love for one another. But am I? Am I willing to yield my ideas of what the kingdom should look like for the role of a servant? Am I really so willing to give up my human preoccupations with power and control and accept a different kind of crown than I was expecting? I see you accept the cross in the midst of such mockery. You could have refused. What more could they have done to you? Yet you begin this journey knowing full well where it will lead. I hear no words of complaint, no protestations of innocence, no cursing the injustice. And yet I am so prone to complain and whine about the most trivial things. Sometimes the things I face in my life are more than trivial. Sometimes the troubles of my life bear down on me, and I so easily fall into self-pity. I assume that I am the only one who bears a cross, or that my cross is larger and heavier than any other's. But I am not alone in that. People all around me bear far more than I must bear. You accepted your cross without self-pity. Can I follow your example?
As they led him away, they seized a man, Simon of Cyrene, who was coming from the country, and they laid the cross on him and made him carry it behind Jesus.
I see Jesus fall from the crushing weight of pain and grief. I don't know how many times he falls. I know his physical strength is failing. The soldiers realize he won't make it to the top of the hill. They force a man from the crowd, Simon, to come and carry the cross for him. I think they are afraid he will die before they can crucify him. They won't be able to make his death a reminder for others not to try to stand up to Rome. But these men are innocent, yet they are both bearing the weight of the world. I have my own cross to bear. Jesus told me I am to take it up daily and to follow him, but I am more afraid of what that means than ever. I fear they will call me to help Simon, so I try to disappear into the crowd. It is easy not to see the needs, pain, and grief around me each day, to ignore the people who need help and to block out their cries. I easily convince myself that I am too busy or already have enough of my own pain. Besides, I don't want to get involved in the lives of others in this way. There are too many needs and only one of me. I don't want to bring the Romans down on my neck because of others. Yet, how can I follow the teachings of Jesus if I ignore those who are in need? A great number of the people followed him, and among them were women who were beating their breasts and wailing for him. But Jesus turned to them and said, "Daughters of Jerusalem, do not weep for me, but weep for yourselves and for your children. For the days are surely coming when they will say, 'Blessed are the barren, and the wombs that never bore, and the breasts that never nursed.' Then they will begin to say to the mountains, 'Fall on us,' and to the hills, 'Cover us.' For if they do this when the wood is green, what will happen when it is dry?"
Jesus, as you struggle along the road toward that awful place of death, you see a group of women among the crowd following you, already grieving at your coming death. You have heard this wailing many times before at times of death and tragic events. Now they mourn for you. You have always shown compassion to women in the same way you have to men. You seem to understand their unique burden in a world that pushes them to the margins of society. Even as you bear this horrific pain, you speak to them. You are dying, and yet more concerned with others than yourself. Your words seem out of place and strange in this time. They appear prophetic, as if you are giving a final warning that we cannot grasp. Perhaps we don't want to hear these words or understand their meaning. You speak of darker days, of worse to come. How can it get any worse than losing you? Is it possible your death is only the beginning of events that will make us weep? Is it possible I am the reason you are on this path? Am I who you call me to be?
When they came to the place that is called the Skull, they crucified Jesus there with the criminals, one on his right and one on his left. Then Jesus said, "Father, forgive them, for they do not know what they are doing." And they cast lots to divide his clothing.
Jesus, I don't want to see this. I force myself to watch as I hear the sharp crack of the hammer against the nail, and I shudder. It sounds so final. Is it over? Have all the things you said, taught, and done come to nothing? You told us about being the light to the world, and yet it appears the darkness is winning. What should I do? I want to rage at the injustice, the cruelty of Rome, the hypocrisy of the high priest, and our religious leader, my own cowardice. How do we not remember you speaking of loving one another, even our enemies, of bearing each other's burdens? Does the guilt of the senseless act only belong to the one who drove the nails, or any of us innocent of your blood? Is it my sin that causes you to die? I want to pretend it's someone else's guilt, someone else's sin. But I am here, Jesus. You are here, dying because of my sin. I am the one who drove the nails.
One of the criminals who were hanged there kept deriding him and saying, "Are you not the Messiah? Save yourself and us." But the other rebuked him, saying, "Do you not fear God, since you are under the same sentence of condemnation? And we indeed have been condemned justly, for we are getting what we deserve for our deeds, but this man has done nothing wrong." Then he said, "Jesus, remember me when you come into your kingdom." And he replied, "Truly I tell you, today you will be with me in paradise."
Between two thieves upon the cross, of man's iniquities to man, between the two, the Son of God hangs lifeless from a wooden stand.
How strange that man must crucify the thief who would their goods possess, and he should also hang to die who came with heaven's gifts to bless. For they to whom the law is not, know thee, by whom the law is given, today upon a cross has paid the price, that all may be forgiven. Who can such reason understand, that this day's deed be justified, and evil walking hand in hand with good
even the thief mocks Jesus. I see a crowd filled with people who only a few days ago came to hear you preach, to seek healing, now that stand, stare, and mock you. I know they are afraid, but they could have stayed away and hidden their faces. The second thief speaks and defends you to the first in the face of the crowd. He is dying and has no fear about his words. He says you are not guilty and don't deserve to die as he does. He must know how you are. He must feel your presence. He asks to be remembered when you come into your kingdom. Surely not. Yet you promise him he will this day be with you in paradise. How can this be? He is a thief, obviously among the worst to be crucified. What do you mean he will be with you in paradise? Will you also forgive others who are so sinful and broken?
Meanwhile, standing near the cross of Jesus were his mother and his mother's sister, Mary, the wife of Cleopas, and Mary Magdalene. When Jesus saw his mother and the disciple whom he loved standing beside her, he said to his mother, "Woman, here is your son." Then he said to the disciple, "Here is your mother." And from that hour the disciple took her into his own home.
These women have been with you and your mother for most of your life. I'm not surprised they are surrounding her and helping her bear grief, even as they deal with their own. Mary Magdalene has never faltered in her support. She knows the full impact of your love and grace. You made her whole. I wonder what your mother must be thinking and feeling as she stands and watches your life fade as you hang on the cross. Is she remembering the words of the angels, of Simeon and so many more who have pronounced over you who you are and the pain she will bear? Does she remember you telling her, "I must be about my Father's business"? With her hands one of your most trusted and loved followers, where are the others? You speak directly to him, telling him she is now his mother for the rest of her life. I cannot understand the weight of his statement. I might visit her or bring her a meal, but to take her on as my mother is too much of a commitment. You are asking a lot. Are you asking the same of me, about other people's mothers, fathers, brothers, sisters? Am I willing to accept?
After this, when Jesus knew that all was now finished, he said, in order to fulfill the scripture, "I am thirsty." A jar full of sour wine was standing there. So they put a sponge full of the wine on a branch of hyssop and held it to his mouth. When Jesus had received the wine, he said, "It is finished." Then he bowed his head and gave up his spirit.
We have ended our journey. We have arrived at the cross. Jesus has said, "Is it finished?" And he's bowed his head and given up his life. The lights will be coming up in just a moment. You're invited to stay and to pray if you would like. You're invited to come and to walk through the stations or go and spend some time at one of the stations that may have meant a lot to you, that may have reached out to you. And when you are ready, you are invited to go in peace, quietly, as we remember the death of our Savior.